Have you ever forgiven someone who never apologized and wondered why you still felt broken? You tell yourself it's the noble thing to do, the right thing, the higher path. You whisper that forgiveness is freedom. Yet, late at night, when the world is quiet, you still feel their shadow pressed against your thoughts. You still replay the words, the betrayal, the hollow apology that never came. It's strange how you can forgive someone and still feel the wound bleeding beneath the bandage. You remember how it started, small lessons dressed as morality. As a child, you were told to be the bigger person, to say it's okay when it wasn't. You learned that to be good was to swallow your pain, to trade justice for peace, to make your heart the battlefield and call it kindness. Forgiveness became your survival, an emotional reflex that said, if I let it go, maybe they'll love me again. And as you grew older, that reflex hardened into a habit. You forgave before you even understood what had been taken from you. Now, as an adult, you carry that conditioning like invisible armor. You smile when you want to scream. You say, it's fine when it isn't. You forgive not because you've healed, but because you're afraid of what might happen if you don't. The fear of being seen as bitter outweighs the need to honor your own hurt. You've been taught that anger makes you small, but forgiveness makes you divine. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispers, what if this isn't healing? What if this is self-abandonment, dressed in virtue? Psychologists call it emotional repression, a defense mechanism where you silence your pain to maintain belonging. The brain confuses relief with resolution. It releases dopamine when you let go, even if the trauma remains. Forgiveness, then, becomes a chemical illusion, a temporary calm masking an unhealed wound. The act that was meant to liberate you begins to enslave you instead. And so, you stand in the ruins of your own patience, holding pieces of yourself you gave away in the name of peace. The world praises you for your grace. They call you strong, kind, enlightened, but inside, you know the truth. You didn't forgive to move on. You forgave to survive. You mistook silence for closure, surrender for strength. Yet deep down, something in you aches for balance, for a way to forgive without reopening the door to those who once broke you. Because maybe forgiveness was never meant to mean reconciliation. Maybe healing isn't about forgetting what happened, but finally remembering who you are beneath the scar. And that realization is where true freedom begins. It often begins in the quiet corners of childhood, the places where you first learned what love costs. You were told to be the bigger person, to share even when you didn't want to hug the one who hurt you and say, it's okay. But it wasn't okay, was it? You remember the sting of unfairness, the lump in your throat when you were told to forgive, not because you felt ready, but because adults needed peace more than truth. You learned that love thrives in silence, that goodness means swallowing the ache so no one else has to feel it. In those moments, something subtle but powerful begins to shape your mind. According to attachment theory, a child's brain is wired through every experience of love and rejection. When comfort comes only after compliance, the mind learns a dangerous lesson. To be loved, you must endure. Neuroscientists call it associative conditioning, the repeated pairing of pain with reward. The hug after the apology becomes the proof that forgiveness keeps you safe. Anger, on the other hand, becomes the forbidden feeling, the one that leads to disconnection, shame, or being called difficult. So, you start performing forgiveness before you understand what boundaries even mean. You smile when you want to cry. You whisper, it's fine, when your heart is breaking. Somewhere deep in your nervous system, forgiveness becomes a strategy, not a sentiment. It's no longer about release, it's about survival. Because to a child, being good isn't a choice, it's a lifeline. Imagine a small boy who's been hit by his older brother. He runs to his mother, trembling, looking for justice. But she sighs, weary, and says, "Be kind, honey. He didn't mean it." The boy learns that justice threatens belonging, that peace is more valuable than truth. Over time, that lesson hardens into a belief. My pain doesn't matter as long as everyone else is happy. And so, he grows into an adult who forgives too soon, who confuses endurance with love, who apologizes even when he's the one bleeding. This is how innocence transforms into emotional servitude. The child's pure empathy is reshaped into guilt-based empathy, the kind that measures worth by how much pain you can absorb without flinching. The subconscious equates forgiveness with safety and anger with danger. The result is a mind that seeks harmony at any cost, even if it means silencing itself. And as you grow older, this conditioning doesn't disappear, it matures. It dresses itself in moral language, cloaks itself in virtue, and calls itself compassion. You begin to believe that letting things go is what makes you good. But beneath that performance of grace lies an untold story of fear. The fear that if you don't forgive, you'll lose the love you've spent your whole life trying to earn. That story, buried since childhood, becomes the compass of adulthood, the invisible script that teaches you to keep forgiving, even when it means forgetting yourself. There comes a point in your life when forgiveness no longer feels like kindness, it feels like exhaustion. You've grown so accustomed to carrying the weight of other people's mistakes that you've forgotten how to set it down. You tell yourself that you're being understanding, patient, loving. You call it compassion, but deep down, you know it's something else, a quiet surrender disguised as virtue. You've become fluent in self-sacrifice. You forgive the partner who betrays your trust because you don't want to make things worse. You excuse the friend who belittles you because that's just how they are. You comfort the people who wound you, even as your own heart fractures beneath the surface. It's not that you don't feel the pain, it's that you've learned to silence it so no one else has to. Somewhere along the way, endurance replaced authenticity, and peace became something you earned through your own silence. Psychologists call it the fawn response, a survival mechanism wired into the nervous system, born from early fear. When fight and flight seem dangerous, your body learns to appease. You abandon confrontation to preserve connection. You adapt to others' moods before they even shift. You read tension in the air the way sailors read wind before a storm, adjusting yourself to prevent the crash. This response feels like empathy, but it's rooted in terror, the terror of being unloved, unsafe, or alone. Neuroscience tells us that every time you suppress anger to maintain harmony, your brain rewards you with a false sense of control. Cortisol dips, dopamine rises. It feels momentarily peaceful, but it's an illusion, a neurochemical sedative that hides the cost. Because each act of premature forgiveness chips away at the borders of your identity. Each time you hold back your truth, you reinforce the belief that your comfort is expendable, that your pain is the price of being loved. You start to live like the saint who saves everyone but themselves. You offer the oxygen mask to others while your own lungs burn. You wear your suffering like a crown, telling yourself it's proof of goodness, unaware that it's also a symptom of self-abandonment. And people, seeing your calmness, your grace, your tolerance, believe you are unbreakable when really you've just learned to bleed quietly. But what if this constant forgiveness isn't healing at all? What if it's a way of keeping yourself small enough to be accepted, compliant enough to be safe? You begin to wonder if forgiveness without accountability is nothing more than surrender in disguise. And perhaps that's the hardest truth of all, to realize that sometimes the path to peace doesn't lie in forgiving others, but in finally forgiving yourself for the years you spent staying silent. Because maybe real healing begins the moment you stop being the martyr and start being honest. Your mind can forgive long before your body does. You can speak the words, release the anger, even feel a momentary calm, but somewhere deep in the architecture of your nervous system, the memory still trembles. It's as if the brain and body are two instruments playing different songs, one trying to let go, the other still vibrating with the echo of pain. Neuroscience shows that forgiveness isn't just an emotional choice, it's a biological event. When you decide to forgive, your brain activates networks in the prefrontal cortex responsible for empathy and regulation. Mirror neurons, those tiny circuits that allow you to feel what others feel, light up. Softening the sharpness of anger, cortisol begins to drop, heart rate steadies. For a brief moment, the body exhales. The mind interprets this as peace. But this peace is fragile, easily shattered by familiarity. Because when you encounter the same person again, the voice, the tone, the smell, your amygdala, the brain's threat detector, wakes up. It recognizes patterns, not apologies. And suddenly, your nervous system remembers what your rational mind wants to forget. Psychologists like Dr. Robert Enright describe forgiveness as a process of emotional release, not reconciliation. True forgiveness, he argues, occurs when you neutralize resentment within yourself, not when you return to the scene of harm. The distinction is critical. The brain associates forgiveness with relief, but reconciliation requires re-engaging the same circuits of trust that were once violated. It's like asking a wound to heal while reopening it. Trauma theory supports this. The hippocampus may archive memories, but the body's somatic system keeps score. You can forgive cognitively, yet your body will still brace for danger every time it senses repetition. Studies on emotional regulation reveal that empathy, when overextended, becomes a form of self-harm. The brain's mirror neurons can blur boundaries, tricking you into feeling responsible for another's suffering, even when they caused yours. Compassion fatigue sets in, and your nervous system begins to fray. Forgiveness, in this context, isn't always a cure. It can be a chemical sedative, numbing your instinct to protect yourself. You may feel lighter after letting go, but the paradox remains. Your brain seeks harmony, while your body seeks safety. One urges you to reconnect, to understand, to empathize. The other begs you to remember, to guard, to run. This is the quiet war between compassion and self-preservation. A war fought not with morals, but with neurons. And perhaps that's the real challenge of healing, not learning how to forgive, but learning how to forgive without betraying your own biology. Because even when your mind whispers, it's over, your body, ever faithful, still remembers the truth. There's a strange kind of power that comes with being the one who forgives. A quiet satisfaction that whispers, I'm the better person. It feels clean, almost divine, like you've transcended the chaos while others drown in it. But if you look closer, beneath that polished surface of peace, there's something else, something darker. Because sometimes forgiveness isn't grace. Sometimes it's vanity wearing a halo. You might know the feeling. You forgive, not because your heart is free, but because you need to believe you are stronger than the one who hurt you. You offer kindness, not as release, but as control. It's the saint's subtle revenge, showing mercy to prove superiority. Yet, in that hidden corner of your mind, a quiet bitterness lingers. You don't scream or curse. You simply light a candle and place it on the grave of what you lost, pretending the flicker is warmth when it's really morning. Jung called this the shadow, the part of you that holds everything you were taught to suppress. Anger, resentment, jealousy, the hunger for justice. You spend your life trying to bury it under virtue, whispering spiritual slogans to silence its voice. But what you repress does not disappear, it waits. It seeps through your tone, your posture, your choices. Every time you say, it's fine, when it isn't, the shadow grows a little stronger. Every time you forgive to prove your purity, you tighten the chains around your own heart. Psychology calls this moral narcissism, the tendency to derive self-worth from being perceived as good. It's an unconscious addiction to virtue, where forgiveness becomes a mirror you stare into to avoid your reflection. You convince yourself you've healed, but in truth, you've only learned to smile through the ache. The body, meanwhile, keeps score. Studies show that suppressed anger doesn't vanish. It embeds itself in the nervous system, raising cortisol, distorting boundaries, slowly eroding your sense of self. You might look calm on the outside, but your body still trembles in places you can't name. You become the saint in chains, a candle burning not to guide the lost, but to light a grave. Forgiveness becomes your drug, and moral superiority your disguise. And the more you feed on it, the emptier you feel. Because true healing was never about being better, it was about being honest. To truly forgive, you must confront the shadow you've been taught to. Fear the part of you that wants to rage, to cry, to be seen, because it is only through acknowledging the darkness that light can become real. Otherwise, forgiveness remains a performance, and the soul forever trapped behind its own halo. From the moment you could understand right and wrong, the world told you that goodness meant forgiveness. Stories, songs, scriptures all echo the same command. Turn the other cheek, love your enemies, let go. From childhood classrooms to sacred pulpits, you were told that forgiveness makes you holy, while anger makes you small. And so, you grew up believing that to be loved, you must be endlessly understanding. That to be worthy, you must never resist. But have you noticed how this idea of goodness always seems to benefit those who cause harm? How forgiveness is preached most loudly to the wounded, never the ones who did the wounding. Religion wrapped it in divinity. Culture sold it as wisdom. Hollywood turned it into happy endings. The villain weeps, the hero smiles, and pain dissolves under the soft glow of redemption. Yet reality rarely offers such mercy. In real life, those who cause suffering rarely cry under the rain. They move on, and those who were hurt remain, clutching forgiveness like a moral trophy, wondering why peace still feels so far away. Psychology calls this the empathy trap, when compassion becomes compulsion, and you measure your worth by how much you can tolerate. Studies show that people conditioned toward excessive agreeableness often experience chronic stress, resentment, and emotional burnout. You might recognize it in yourself, the reflex to say, "It's fine," before your heart even decides. It's not peace you feel, it's fear, wearing politeness as armor, fear of being seen as bitter, fear of being called unkind. Especially for women, this conditioning runs deep. Society tells them that softness is their crown, that understanding is their highest virtue. They are taught to absorb pain and still smile to interpret cruelty as brokenness and betrayal as a lesson in compassion. And when they finally draw boundaries, they are accused of being cold, unloving, or unforgiving. But this isn't moral failure, it's cultural programming, a quiet indoctrination that turns strength into guilt. Forgiveness, once sacred, has been twisted into performance. A social ritual to prove you are good, civilized, enlightened. You're praised not for your healing, but for your restraint. The world applauds your grace while ignoring your grief. And beneath the applause, a question lingers. When forgiveness becomes a stage act, whose peace are you really protecting, theirs or yours? You begin to realize that sometimes forgiveness isn't about liberation, it's about compliance. The myth of the good person demands your silence, your softness, your surrender. It teaches you to light candles for those who set the fire. But goodness, real goodness, isn't the absence of anger. It's the courage to honor your pain without letting it define you. And until you unlearn the world's definition of good, you'll keep mistaking your own silence for virtue. Because every time you choose peace over truth, you lose a little more of yourself and call it grace. There comes a night when you can't sleep, not because of noise, but because of memory. The mind replays the same scene, the same words spoken by a different face. You thought you'd moved on, that you'd forgiven, that time had done its job, but the wound, though silent, still hums beneath the surface. You feel it when someone raises their voice. You feel it when love knocks again, and you hesitate to open the door. It's strange how the heart remembers what the mind insists it has forgotten. Forgiveness, when repeated without accountability, becomes a kind of spiritual debt, a soul that keeps loaning compassion to those who never pay it back. You tell yourself it's noble, that letting go makes you free, but over time, you start to notice the cost. You flinch at kindness, you distrust apologies, you love carefully, strategically, with one foot always pointed toward the exit. This is the emotional residue of too many second chances, a quiet exhaustion that seeps into everything. Psychologists call this emotional dissonance, when your outward forgiveness clashes with your inner truth. The conscious mind insists, "I've healed," while the subconscious still trembles. The brain's memory circuits don't distinguish between past and present. Every reminder reactivates the same pain. The nervous system can't be fooled by moral philosophy. It remembers sensations, tones, the way betrayal feels in the body. You can forgive 1,000 times, but the body will still whisper, "Be careful." And then comes the corrosion. Trust becomes a fragile performance. You start to question everyone's intentions, even your own. You tell yourself that understanding others' pain makes you compassionate, but secretly, it's made you wary. You've seen too much of what people can do in the name of love. The constant balancing act between empathy and self-preservation leaves you fractured, half angel, half ghost. You walk through relationships like someone tiptoeing over broken glass, bleeding quietly but smiling anyway. This is the slow decay of chronic forgiveness, the soul's erosion beneath the weight of its own gentleness. It's a subtle kind of grief, the kind that doesn't wail but whispers. A mourning for the self that once trusted freely, for the version of you that believed goodness was enough. And the cruel irony is that this pain often hides behind grace. People see your calm, your composure, your maturity, but they don't see the night spent rewinding old conversations, searching for where you lost yourself, trying to keep the peace. But maybe this is where something shifts. Maybe healing isn't about opening your heart to everyone again, but learning to guard it without guilt, because forgiveness was never meant to be a revolving door. Sometimes, the bravest act of compassion is choosing not to return, and it's there, in the quiet refusal to repeat old suffering, that real freedom begins to take shape. There comes a moment when you realize forgiveness isn't about them, it's about releasing the weight that's been pressing on your soul. You stop waiting for the apology that never comes, the explanation that never arrives. You understand that closure isn't found in another person's remorse, it's found in your decision to stop bleeding for someone who never learned to stop cutting. Forgiveness, then, becomes something quieter, deeper, more sacred. It's not an open door, it's a final exhale. You learn that healing doesn't always mean reunion, that you can forgive and still never speak again. You can wish them peace while keeping your distance. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. The same clarity a forest has when it burns away what no longer serves it. There's no hatred in the fire, only the wisdom of survival. Boundaries become your new language of compassion. They say, "I release you, but I will not abandon myself again." Psychologists call this radical acceptance, the ability to face what happened without resistance or denial. It's not pretending the pain didn't matter. It's acknowledging that it did, and still choosing not to let it define you. In neuroscience, healing isn't about forgetting, it's about rewiring. The brain learns safety through repetition, through small acts of reclaiming control. Every time you say no to what once broke you, your nervous system begins to believe in peace again. Forgiveness, in this sense, becomes an embodied act. You breathe differently, you stand taller, you sleep without the hum of unfinished stories. You might still feel the ache sometimes, the echo of an old name, a song, a memory, but it no longer controls you. That ache becomes proof of growth. Because the truth is, forgiveness isn't about erasing pain, it's about transforming its shape until it fits inside your chest without suffocating you. It's the difference between carrying a wound and carrying wisdom. Between clinging to what hurt you and holding yourself through the healing. There is a quiet kind of power in walking away, not in anger, but in reverence for your own peace. You stop performing sainthood. You stop negotiating with ghosts. You realize you can love someone and still protect yourself from them. You can honor what was without resurrecting what died. This is forgiveness without return, the final evolution of empathy into strength. And as you walk away, there's no grand closure, no perfect goodbye, only silence. But in that silence, something shifts. You feel lighter, not because the past has vanished, but because you've finally placed it down. You've forgiven not to heal them, but to free yourself. And perhaps that's what true peace really is. The art of loving what once broke you, while never again handing it the power to do so. There comes a moment when you stop chasing closure and begin to understand that peace is not something given, it's something taken back. You stand at the edge of what was, staring into the quiet wreckage of the past, and realize that forgiveness was never meant to mend what's broken. It was meant to free the one who's been holding the shards, you. You start to see forgiveness not as a gentle act, but as fire, pure, merciless, transformative. Fire does not negotiate with what it burns. It consumes the unnecessary so that life can begin again. Jung once said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And maybe that's what letting go really is, not a denial of the pain, but an acknowledgement of it so complete that it loses its power to define you. You stop worshipping your suffering. You stop touching the same wound to see if it still hurts. You stop mistaking endurance for love. Nietzsche wrote that what is done out of love always takes place beyond good and evil. And perhaps forgiveness, in its highest form, exists there too, beyond moral debt, beyond fairness, beyond the endless human desire for balance. You realize that true forgiveness is not about declaring someone innocent. It's about releasing yourself from the courtroom altogether. You walk out, leaving behind the gavel, the evidence, the verdict, because no amount of justice can rewrite what's already been lived. The brain, with all its logic, resists this. It wants patterns, explanations, symmetry. But the soul moves differently. It speaks in paradoxes. It understands that dignity is not found in retaliation, but in restraint. That strength is not holding on tighter, it's having the courage to loosen your grip. You learn that the memory will stay, but the meaning can change. What once felt like punishment now becomes instruction. The scar remains, but it no longer throbs. Forgiveness, then, becomes something sacred. A ritual between you and your own becoming. You no longer seek to be understood by those who broke you. You stop performing mercy as virtue. You simply breathe and let the ashes settle. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." But maybe the truer form of victory is not revenge at all, it's indifference. It's the quiet realization that you no longer need to win because you've already left the battlefield. And as you turn away, there is no grand speech, no final confrontation, only silence. A silence that feels like light. You step into it, knowing that reconciliation is a bridge built by two, but forgiveness is a door you open alone. And in walking through it, you don't just let go of them, you let go of who you were when they hurt you.